Okay, here we are in the City of Atlanta data set that logs, it's a log of certain kinds of crimes in 2016. So first let's look through this sum and see what we have in here. First let's freeze the top row. What all do we have? Report date, occurrence time, some things I'm not quite sure what those are. I would have to call APD to find out. What beat? Have the location. Let's stretch that out so we can see the location. What else do we have? Location type, not sure what that is. This is interesting. UC2 literal is the description of the crime that's logged here. We can see the neighborhood, the NPU, and the latitude and longitude. Okay, how many rows do we have? Let's go to the end. 29,113. It's a pretty small data set. So let's put this in a pivot table and see what we can find out about it. Go up to Data, Pivot Table, and again, it's just asking you what all data do you want to look at, and by default, it's saying all of the data, A1, the top left cell, to bottom right, which is W29113. Okay. So let's talk about the numbers of each of these crimes. Take UC2 literal, that description in English of the crime. Let's drag that down to row labels. Let's also drag it down to values. It's defaulting to count of these crimes, which is exactly what I want it to do. If yours doesn't default to count, there'll be a way to change that. On mine, I would do it with this I button. Yours might be different. But what we're looking at here is count of each of these crimes. We're asking it to count the number of times it sees an auto theft, the amount of times it sees a non-residential burglary, etc., etc. We can also sort. On some versions of Excel, you have a little sort button here. It's the exact same thing as going to data sort. Okay. So let me tell you, this is a 40,000 foot view of the data. It's not completely accurate with reality, and I'll show you why. For example, it counts 107 homicides, and there are indeed 107 homicide incidents on this list. However, a quick look at the news will show that APD counted 111 homicides in 2016. My hunch is that this data set counts a double homicide, like one incident with two victims, as a single incident. I mean, that's my hunch, and you'd have to call APD to confirm it. But what I'm saying is this data suggests a broad truth. Broadly, there were more larcenies from vehicles than larcenies from non-vehicles. Broadly, there were more larcenies than auto thefts. But in the end, the data we're looking at are tips. We see that there's space for inaccuracy, and we see that you still have to call APD to make sure you're understanding the data correctly. I mean, in fact, the PIO's office, there's a guy that handles these data sets, and you can talk to him. But, you know, before you report any of these numbers, you'd need to call them, make sure you understand the limitations of the data set. But even so, you can get some story ideas from this, and let me show you one that some outlets have used. Right. Let's find pivot tables. Let's use pivot tables to find which addresses are associated with the most crimes. Let's get rid of this UC2 literal. Just click, drag it to the side, and throw it away. Let's look at locations. Where did locations go? Oh, location. Click, drag that down to row labels. And then click and drag it down to values as well. This is the number of crimes that's associated with each address. If yours doesn't default to it being sorted from high to low, you can also sort here. You can use this button if you have it on your version of Excel. It's the exact same thing as going up to data sort, but we're looking at it from high to low here. And clearly, I'm no crime reporter, but I didn't realize that so many incidents would have been reported at shopping centers. Like this is a Walmart, that's Lenox Mall. This is a Walmart, that's Lenox again. Greenbrier, Target. Not sure what that is. Target. And then you'll also see that some of these addresses are actually referred to the same place. Like this, 1275 Caroline Street Northeast at Target, is the same as this. A computer counts them separately, whereas we humans realize they're the same. Let's look at the types of crimes at these addresses. Let's go find UC2 literal again. And we can sort these again. Click on this column you want to sort by. Click from highest to lowest. Larceny, non-vehicle, larceny, non-vehicle, larceny, non-vehicle. A lot of that is probably shoplifting. And I guess it doesn't take a genius to figure out that shoplifting would occur at stores. But some news outlets have taken a closer look at how many crimes have been reported at different kinds of stores. And some of them have found that there's some criticism of Walmarts out there, that maybe Walmarts are not doing security as well as some places. Let's look let's look at some addresses. Let's take a closer look at some addresses in Atlanta and see what we get. First of all, I'm going to take away the crimes for now. I'm going to set them aside for a second while we deal with addresses. How do we combine this one and this one? What we're going to do is filter just for addresses that contain 1275 Caroline Street. So let's start with a Target. We're going to use this. This is our filter. I'm going to make that a little bigger so we can read it. We're going to filter by labels. These are our labels that contain 1275 Caroline. So these are essentially the different ways that the police have written this address. We see there's 138 incidents. All right, so I'm gonna jot that on a piece of paper at the side. Let's look at some other addresses. Let's clear that filter. And let's try filter by label that contains 1801 Howell Mill. That's a Walmart. That's 210 incidents. And we know that most of them broadly are larceny, not from vehicle. Probably a good bit of that is shoplifting. Let's try Lenox Mall. All right, we'll clear filter again. Filter by label contains 3393 Peachtree. Whoops, I need to spell it right. Peachtree. That's 405 incidents. That's a good bit more than Target and Walmart, but they also have nicer stuff at Lenox. Let's look at another address. Let's look at another Walmart. Clear filter. Let's look at this one. That's a Walmart. Filter by label contains 835 Martin Luther King. I don't think that's right. What did I spell? I spelled something wrong. Clear filter. 835 Martin L. King. See? All right. Filter contains 835. Let's just try it. Let's keep it simple. 835 Martin. Okay. Now we have about 203 incidents there. So what this tells us is, this is kind of a tip. Okay, at Target we have 138 incidents. At Walmart on Howell Mill we have 210. At Lenox we have 405. At MLK Walmart we have 203. I think the next step then would be, at this point, you call the police, you call some law enforcement sources and see if they find maybe one location attracts more calls or has less private security than others. There's been some reporting done by other outlets, and they've found some law enforcement agencies in some places complain about Walmart. So that's an angle you could follow up on. And I'll show you one more thing here too. Let's go back to Caroline Street. Let's go back to 1275 Caroline. What I want to show is that the numbers at the whole shopping center obviously are probably larger. 1275 is just the target. But what if we just filtered on things that contain just the word Caroline? This also picks up the Kroger. Some of these, you'd have to double check the addresses, but some of these are probably, the other little shops in the shopping center. But the point I'm making is, you fiddle around with the data some, it might give you some ideas, but in the end, you have to check back with the police, see if any of your hunches, anything that the data is telling you is actually a story. It may be, it may not be, but see, it takes you like 15 minutes to fiddle with this data some, and you could get some story ideas out of it that may pan out and be something pretty interesting.